I will call to order the City of Buellton's Planning Commission for Thursday, July 15th. Commissioner Liggett, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
Flags are here.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Beautiful.
Roll call.
Commissioner Liggett.
Here.
Commissioner Mercado.
Here.
Commissioner Sarkia.
Hello.
Vice Chair Blocktyke is absent. Chair Hamel.
Here. And I wanted to welcome everyone because we're live and in person. This is our first Planning Commission in many, many months, a year and a half probably. Reordering of agenda, none. Presentations, none. Approval of minutes from our meeting June 3rd. Have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the regular planning commission meeting of June 3rd.
Second.
We can do a all in favor. of
All in
this one.
favor?
Aye.
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 Public comments. This is where public can comment on anything in general regarding to the Planning Commission, or I think the mayor always says compliments or complaints. I don't think we have any members of the public tonight. Consent calendar, none. Continued public hearings, none. New public hearings, none. Other business. Conceptual review of the 518 mixed-use project, 518 Avenue of Flags. Ms. Andrea, are you presenting tonight?
Yes, I am. So Irma was hoping to be able to join us from where she is located on her vacation, but it sounds like the Wi-Fi connection's not great. So I will go ahead and take this one on tonight. So just give me a few minutes or seconds here to pull up the PowerPoint. All right. Share my screen. Okay. All right, we're all set here. All right, so I'm not sure how to, there we go. Okay, perfect. All right, so good evening, Chair Hamel and Commissioners. What we will be covering tonight is the conceptual review of the 518 project, which is a mixed-use project conceptually proposed at 518 Avenue of Flags. To begin, I'd just like to give a brief overview of the project. So the owner of the project, of the property is 518 Avenue of Flags LLC, a representative of Cameron Amiri. However, the applicant is Man by R LLC, and we have Brandon Mann of Man by R LLC here in the audience tonight, as well as his project architect. What is being presented tonight is a potential new development application on a site which has a previous approved development plan. And the project would consist of a mixed-use commercial residential project. The project would be located within the Avenue of Flags specific plan area on the northeast corner of Avenue of Flags and 2nd Street. The project would include a town plaza corner on one of the 4 corners for the that is slated for as to be the downtown core. So here's the vicinity map. So you can see the aerial image of where the star is. That would be the proposed project site. And you've got, this is an older aerial. So the next slide will show a more updated aerial, and you can kind of see the Avenue Heights apartments that's recently been constructed. But basically the project site is bounded by Avenue of Flags to the east, 2nd Street to the south, and the Avenue Heights apartment project to the, to the east, and Avenue of Flags is to the west. Adjacent land uses, we've got just south of 2nd Street is the approved Creekside Village project, so not yet constructed, but approved. And the project would be immediately adjacent to median 3, public median number 3 within the Avenue of Flags specific plan. So again, this aerial image just shows the more recently developed Avenue Heights Apartments project to give you some perspective there. So some site information. The project again is located within the Avenue of Flags specific plan area, specifically within District 3, which is the Civic Junction and Town Plaza area. The underlying zoning for the project site is general commercial or CR. And setbacks and massing for the project would need to be in conformance with the form-based code within the Avenue of Flags specific plan. The proposed height of the project, or the maximum height within the Avenue of Flags specific plan is 35 feet with up to 50 feet allowed with the DOR, Development Opportunity Reserve, or a development plan modification. The project site is located fully within the 100-year flood zone. So there will need to be grading to comply with the floodplain ordinance or an alternative method that would resolve the fact that the project is located in the flood zone. The site is currently vacant and is located on one parcel of approximately 1.22 acres in size. So the project vision. So the vision for the project would be a commercial and residential community, and it would be to provide a commercial retail presence on the Avenue of Flags and would be targeted toward local businesses. The idea would be to serve the needs of the area residents and the community as a whole, and to also create quality multifamily homes with open space amenities in the form of central courtyard, terraced roof decks, and views of the surrounding hills. So the project, upon our conceptual review, which I'll go into detail about, what level of staff review, what we do as part of a conceptual review, which is not a full review for compliance with the specific code, but based upon that, the project generally seems to be consistent with the Avenue of Flags specific plan and the Art Deco design style. And we will, moving forward, work with the applicant to refine those elements of the project to ensure that they're consistent with that plan. And the project does appear to complement neighboring developments. So getting into project information. So the project does consist of 2 separate buildings. And so I'll just cover building 1. We'll call them building 1 and building 2. So building 1 is located immediately adjacent to the Avenue of Flags, closest to the street there. And this building contains a corner courtyard mixed use building. The corner courtyard is approximately 650 square feet and is a town plaza corner courtyard, compliant with the Avenue of Flags specific plan. This building is oriented to the walkable and shoppable main street that we hope to achieve on the avenue. And so in terms of the uses, approximately on the ground floor of this building, there's approximately 5,500 square feet at grade of general commercial space. And 1 dwelling unit is proposed on the first floor residential. The second and third floors, which is above the commercial space, would include 15 dwelling units. And there would also be a roof deck and roof decks and catwalk bridge connecting to building 2. So on to building 2. So that building is more on the interior of the project site behind building 1. So in terms of the ground floor, there would be covered parking. It's a covered parking garage, which should be at grade. It also would consist of a podium deck, which would serve as the foundation and the supports for the residential floors above. This building also provides tandem parking for the dwelling units, which we can show you what that sort of looks like later on in the presentation. But the building does consist of 3 floors. Building 2 consists of 3 floors of multifamily residential uses for a total of, in this building, 32 dwelling units. And that's a mix of studio, 1 bedroom, and 2 bedroom units. With this building, there's a central common courtyard and outdoor living space with a shared barbecue and seating area. The proposed density of the project is 39 dwelling units per acre. The DOR within the Development Opportunity Reserve within the specific plan does allow for a range of 20 to 40 dwelling units per acre. The building height proposed is 38 feet, which, as mentioned before, DOR does allow for a maximum of 50 feet. And just some other project statistics, the 15% inclusionary housing requirement would apply, which would equate to Approximately 8 affordable units would be required for this project. So moving on to parking and access, surface parking would be provided, and that would be located behind the mixed use building, fronting the Avenue of Flags, so kind of in the interior of the project and along the north and east property lines. There will be a combination of indoor garage parking in the form of tandem spaces, carport covered with potential solar panels, parking spaces, and also uncovered parking spaces, which are all being proposed in combination with this project. So per information provided by the applicant, the project would be required to provide 77 spaces for the residential uses and 19 spaces for the commercial uses, for a total of 96 total spaces required. Again, staff has not done a detailed review for compliance with our municipal code and Avenue of Flag specific plan, and that's something we'll look at, but this is the information provided according to the applicant. The project is proposing to provide 100 total spaces on site, and additionally to install 7 public parking spaces off-site, immediately adjacent to the project site on Avenue of Flags. And I'll show you that later on the site plan where that would be located. And it would be in the form of parallel street parking. The project as designed proposes 2 vehicular access points along 2nd Street. Again, I'll show you that on the next couple slides here when I have the site plan available. Here it is. So as you see, just to give you some reference here, the Avenue of Flags is to the left, on the left side of your screen, and 2nd Street on the bottom part of your screen. So here you see the 2 access points along 2nd Street and kind of in a U shape. So the on-site circulation takes the form of sort of a U shape there. You see the commercial building fronting the avenue here, and which is building 1, like we spoke of. And building 2 is on the interior here, and you can kind of see the catwalk bridge that connects the 2 buildings, building 1 and building 2. Also of note here, you can see the carport structure, so one on the north of the property and one on the east portion of the property. And you can see where the tandem garages are proposed. They're labeled here. It's a little hard to probably read on the screen here. But you also see the surface parking on the perimeter of the interior access. And then just pointing out the 7 spaces that the applicant would be proposing to install that are off-site, that don't count for the total overall parking provided on the site, but it's something that they have indicated they're interested in potentially pursuing in terms of installing off-site parking spaces along the avenue, public parking spaces. So you can see in the center of building 2 here, the barbecue area, the public open space, and the project site does have some perimeter landscaping provided, and the corner courtyard here on the corner of Avenue of Flags and 2nd Street. Let's see, we'll move on to the next slide. So here is the conceptual front elevation. So this would be the elevation you'd see if you were standing on the Avenue of Flags. I'll kind of just briefly touch on that. And then the image to the bottom of the screen here is a section. So this is as if you are standing on 2nd Street, sort of looking into the building. So on the top here, I'll just note a couple things here that, the conceptual design as proposed does appear to attempt to complement the building that as approved on the Creekside Village project, which is the project on the other side, just south of this project on the other side of 2nd Street. So you can kind of take a look at that and what that looks like. But in terms of the section here on the bottom part of the screen here, you can kind of see just looking left to right. So here's the Avenue of Flags. And here's building 1 fronting the avenue, where you've got the commercial on the ground floor, residential on the 2nd floor, and then the roof deck on top. And then the roof deck bridge connecting to building 2. And then again, of course, the drive aisle below. So then you've got the 3 stories of residential in building 2 and the garage and tandem spaces on the ground floor. And moving back into the courtyard and the private or the open space for the residents there on the project site, and yet another roof deck provided in building 2. And again, as you move back, you've got residential units on the 3 stories above the ground floor with some garage space and tandem parking spaces as well. So just some brief information on the Development Opportunity Reserve. So as the project is conceptually proposed at this point, DOR incentives may be needed to address the increased residential density proposed above the baseline allowed, and potentially other items if applicable. So generally, some of the DOR benefits being considered include potentially contribution toward construction of Avenue Flag specific planned public improvements and/or public benefits, and that's to be determined. And really, the project specific terms for the DOR would be memorialized by a development agreement. And if the project would require entering into a development agreement, this would require final review and approval by the City Council. So just as some general information, this is the second project which would be requesting consideration under the DOR program, the first being the Creekside Village project just south of this. So permits and discretionary actions. The land use permit for this would be a final development plan, and a discretionary action that would also be required would be, again, a development agreement to implement any DOR terms that would be necessary. Some potential other permits and discretionary actions, depending on the formal application that we may receive, could potentially involve a tract map. That would be to subdivide the property if any of the units are intended for sale. And any development plan modifications or other actions to address any deviations from the zoning ordinance. So such as some items we've seen before as height setbacks, potentially the tandem parking, and anything as applicable once we take a full and complete review of a formal submittal. So some initial staff comments, first related to the solar carports. We will need to assure and work with the applicant on appropriate architectural design, setbacks, screening, landscaping, and other considerations for the adjacent commercial and residential uses. A loading space will be required, and that's a code requirement for any commercial uses that exceed 3,000 square feet in floor area. A loading space needs to be provided. In terms of tandem parking, this will need some further review, and once we do a more full and complete review of the plans, we'll dive into tandem parking. But basically, there are it may involve some discretionary actions on the part of the Planning Commission and the City Council, just depending on, we've done some preliminary research in the code about tandem parking and where in the code it does allow it. And so just as for some examples, it's allowed in mobile home parks for accessory dwelling units, and as an incentive if needed to achieve affordable housing mix per our affordable housing and density bonus code sections. As part of the proposal for tandem parking, what we would also be looking at is to ensure that there's adequate vehicular access, turning radii, and safe vision clearance for vehicles. And moving on, so in terms of, again, final development plan would be required, DOR and development terms included in a development agreement, and some potentials, track map, development plan modification, depending on the specifics of the project that gets submitted. In terms of environmental or CEQA that would be undertaken as part of this project, it would depend on the density increase being requested. That being said, there is the potential for a focused traffic analysis that would be required to determine the level of environmental review required based upon that density increase. But that's something we would look at more closely upon a formal submittal. And again, just this last bullet point here, a detailed review of plans would occur when a formal application and fees are submitted. So that concludes my staff presentation, and I'm open for any questions that the Planning Commission may have of me. As I mentioned before, we do have the applicants, Brandon Mann and his architect here as well, that I believe wish to give a presentation as well. So I'll turn it over to Chair Hamill and we can facilitate that.
Thank you, Andrea. Any questions for Andrea? I'll start with you, Commissioner Mercado, since you're on my right.
Not at this time. I'm good.
Me neither. Very good.
Okay. I have a couple questions, but they might be for the applicant.
Okay.
One's just kind of a clarification, and it's pretty clear from that cross section.
Mhm.
But the frontage on Avenue Flags doesn't really show that, but there are certain parts in, especially building 2,
Mhm.
where it will be 4 stories, correct? It will be parking and then 3.
So yeah, so I'll let the architect kind of discuss some of the details, but
Okay.
the idea is the
Okay.
tuck under parking and then 3 stories above that.
Okay.
In terms of what that, the height that ultimately results from that and what that looks like from the ground or from the cross section, like you mentioned, I'll let
Okay.
the architect for the project address that specifically.
My other question is about tandem parking, so
Yeah.
I'll just turn it over to the applicant.
All right. Well, give me just a second here. I will share their PDF. So, let's see. I'll go ahead and share the screen here. Okay. All right.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Andrea and city staff, and thank you, honorable planning commissioners, for allowing us to present our project in front of you tonight. My name is Brandon Mann with MB Development Company, or Manbauer LLC, on behalf of the applicant. And here with me is part of my architecture team, David Gibbs. I also have my business partner, Waleed El-Bayar, on Zoom if we need extra backup. So first off, I want to say it's great to actually be sitting here in front of you in person. The last year and a half of Zoom meetings or online have been very interesting, but I'm glad things are opening up as long as everybody stays healthy. We're very excited to talk about the 518 mixed use project. I know the city has done an exemplary job with the specific plan and the downtown area, which is why we pursued the Creekside Village project in the first place. Since day one, we've always tried to, match the city's vision and kind of see it fulfilled. One of the most important things for us was always not to be the only project that went forward, and we really hope we'd be the catalyst. And while we can't do every project on the avenue, we're really happy to be able to do this one and work on the one across the street, because we really feel that it's going to be successful for both projects, not to be kind of the only one on the block. And having those 2 corners, we feel, is really special to activate those 2 corners of the avenue. I've always felt that the downtown core of Buellton and Avenue of Flags can really be a nexus for living, shopping, and recreation, but we need the development to come through. So we can walk through the 518 mixed use project, and while they are complementary to each other and maybe considered, a phase 1 or a phase 2, they are both unique, and we can show you those different features. But I do really feel that the success of both projects, or each on their own, is better together. So why don't we go through? So first and foremost, as Andrea had mentioned in the staff report, it is 48 units. We have a 38 feet height, and Patty, to one of your comments about the 4 stories. So that is one thing that we were very excited about, is on Creekside Village, due to the fact of the site constraints, we had to build a podium deck under the project. So it's all on top of that concrete. And that's about like 13 to 15 feet. So the first floor is already very high. Then we have, 2 stories of residential above it. On this project, with these garages on the first floor, they can be considerably shorter. And therefore, we're able to get essentially 3 residential stories with 4 total stories within the same height. So it's about 38 feet, and they're both under 40. And the specific plan allows up to 50 for the working height. So we wanted to not make it a super tall building, but they're pretty consistent. So on this project, one of the most important things to us, and given the comments from last year going through Creekside on the Planning Commission and Council, was the parking requirement. So if you remember on Creekside, we had to ask for about 30 spots almost off the site that we weren't able to put on the site. And that was, a contentious item. So one of the things we really strive for on this project was how to minimize any of those, outstanding impacts. So this design for the site allows us to get 100% of the required parking on site. So there's no issue with having to worry about, is the project fully parked, or will it hold? Everything's on site. The only trade-off is these tandem garages. And I know we're still exploring that with the city staff. I don't know if the city code specifically allows it. I don't know if it specifically prohibits it. But in our experience, and I can let David talk about tandem parking that he's built, I've built a bunch of projects or worked on them on, in Ventura County, Santa Barbara, and San Luis. And tandem parking is actually pretty consistent for a lot of developments. It may be new in Buellton. It's only going to be for the 2-bedroom units. And in my experience, the people leasing out the 2-bedroom units are either related or friends or know each other. It's very rare to have 2 random people lease up a 2-bedroom unit together. And it really is kind of just the same as if you had a garage at your house and your spouse, partner, or your kid is backed out on the driveway and you're in the garage. It really functions well, and those are only for those 19 units. But that allowed us to get 100% of parking on site. So we feel it also allows us to get the residential units out of the flood zone, which is important for us too, because you can't really build residential units on the ground floor. And what we wanted to do with the corridor for the commercial, which is consistent with Creekside Village to the south, is keeping that kind of view corridor the same. So we chose to do some flood mitigation requirements that don't have to have us raise our building site. So you don't want to be going to a walking store or coffee shop and having to go up, stairs or a ramp, which would have to be about 4 to 5 feet, relatively 3 to 5 if we didn't have to do that. And we felt to be pretty awkward. So for the experience of the avenue, we felt that if we're going to keep everything on the ground floor, it's a better experience for the consumers and those living and just the people that are looking at these projects. So that said, the tandem parking helps us get 100% parking on site, and it helps us get the residential units out of the floodplain. But I know we're going to have to work on that with Planning Commission and Council to see if that is acceptable. Another thing that's new is those solar carports in the back. Now, they're not make or break for the project. We just felt we would explore some different and new concepts. You won't be able to see them from the Avenue of Flags because the buildings will pretty much block them. But given California's solar requirements on top of the buildings nowadays, we figured it would be a good way to kind of allow our building to open up and breathe and also meet those California state requirements. It also allows us to give some shade to some of the parking that's not in the garages. As on Creekside, we had the giant garage deck for most of the spots to be under shade anyway. So we figured it kind of did a dual use, but we're open to discussion on it. Another thing on the site that I know Planning Commission was asking us about on Creekside, which we weren't able to make amends to, was a lot more open space and amenities. And given the design of this site or the layout, we're kind of able to address that. So you notice that when Andrea went through the site, we had about 3 different roof deck areas, and we have a park and a parquet, which will actually have grass and an area for people to sit down and picnic, which we didn't really have on Creekside because it was on top, all the amenity and open space was on top of the concrete. So that being said, we also have a lot of different common and residential open space, and we feel that we have more than enough commercial that can be commercial or flex to serve, whatever uses are going to be coming on the avenue and want to be there. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm able to answer any questions. I figured I would stop talking and let David kind of go through the technicals of the design. But if you have any questions for us, feel free. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brandon.
No problem.
Thank you, Andrea. You guys have covered so many of the good details. So the thunder is gone for me, but that's good. I wanted to point out a couple things while we're on this sheet. When it comes to the solar panels and the carports, I actually have a couple pictures that we can look at what that actually aesthetically might look like. But one of the things we focused on when we did this is, if you look on the northern side, if you would, of this sheet, there's a building that's already currently there, and we try to line it up with that building. So where that space was open with some trees, we made sure that our solar panels were off to the left, so that carport lines right up with a building that's on, which is a 0 required side setback there. And we have about 4 feet for landscape. And then we did the same thing with the solar panels right up against the new multifamily residential there. So that was really strategic for us, is where we place those. The other thing I wanted to mention is the specific plan calls out for 1 covered parking space per unit. We actually, by doing the tandem parking, are able to provide all residential parking is covered. The only uncovered parking spaces are the ones that are required for the commercial space. So we thought that was a really good feature. And then, as Brandon is talking about, the tandem spaces would just be for the 2-bedroom, and they each have their own space. And I have a couple pictures to show how that would work as well. And then, as we talk about the flood zone, that was really important because actually per code you can't put a residential unit in a flood zone. It's it's illegal. So for us, the main thing that we wanted to clarify is actually on building 1, that's storage in the back. That's not actually a residential unit. Sorry for any confusion there. So there's no residential unit in the first floor. No worries over there. No worries. And so we were looking at this and okay, we want to provide amenities on the ground floor and we want to have a site that is 100% parked. And so when we looked at this, the only real conceivable way to do this is with the tandem parking. And so having 19 of them aligned with the 19 2-bedrooms, that was strategic so that it's like, as he said, no one fighting different units over certain garages. It's your garage, it's for your unit, maybe your family, maybe your roommates. So it should work perfect. Go ahead and hit the next slide. This gives you the opportunity to see what is that mid-level like. So, and I'll show you this a little bit better in the section. Commercial retail, they're looking for that 16 to 17 to 18 feet of volume, right? As you can see in here, there's a drop ceiling. It's a little bit low for commercial. They would look for a little bit more. Plus there's HVAC and all those different systems that need to go in. So when you're looking at how do you get residential floors to work well with a commercial, what you want to do, it worked out perfect with us. We have an 8-foot height for the garages, and then we have our 10-foot for each of the residential. That adds up to a perfect 18 feet, which is ideal for commercial, which also does a really important thing when it comes to our carport with our bridges. With a trash trucks coming in or a fire truck, whatever comes in, there are certain requirements that they need as far as height goes. And so you can't have a residential bridge at, not 8 feet. So by able to line these up, we actually have our pedestrian bridges going right across to the residential units at only a height that's appropriate for those kind of vehicular and utility trucks. So that worked out really well. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So this one is when you can see you're finally on the level that has residential over the commercial, and it relates at the same level as what would be the second floor for the residential as well. But it's technically 2 floors above the garages. And then you go to the final, and that's where you can see we have a residential common building that relates to both floors and has amenities. So we wanted to make sure that each floor had amenities for the users to be able to walk right out without having to go down the elevator or down some stairs, right to amenity to use. The other thing we did was we strategically put the roof deck on the corner to relate to our town corner plaza. We thought it'd be really good to not have 3 stories there, but instead have 2 stories. Gives it better solar access, better ability to have views, just doesn't feel as intimidating when you're next to a 3-story building there. So we thought that opened up that corner. I wanted to touch on that corner actually for a second. Could you go back 2 more slides? I meant to do that before. So we show that there's 650 square feet for that town corner. The minimum you're allowed to have is 15 feet, and you can go up to 100. But when we looked at this, we wanted to try to get as much units as we could and have a substantial amount of commercial. If you want to have that plaza a little bit bigger, we could probably work in removing some of the commercial. But we wanted to show you guys, if we maximize the site, be able to get the right amenities, get enough commercial and avenue flags, and still be able to park it, we can just work from there. So this is a 650 square foot corner plaza, but we're proposing to do some sidewalk bulb outs. And when you do the sidewalk bulbs out, it actually makes it a 1,650 square foot plaza, which is quite substantial. And I think it will feel really comfortable and almost comparable to right across the street where there's even a larger plaza. So we like the way those work out. Let's go ahead and go all the way to our LR.
David?
Yes.
On the bulb outs, will they be on both Avenue of Flags and Second?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to go back. So it works out really well actually too, because you want to orient your parallel parking and have them off the street, because you don't want parallel parking right on the corner where people are trying to stop for stop signs. So it's already a nice amenity to help traffic flow better, and you're creating a nice plaza and you're giving people a buffer, especially if you have outdoor dining or something like that. Yeah.
Andrea, can you go down just 2 more? To the
Sure.
3rd floor? And one thing that's hard to see here, but we really like too, is what David had mentioned, that roof deck on that corner is kind of our version on 518 of doing the roof deck that is on Creekside Village, or the wine deck. So both the corners, if you're looking from Avenue down 2nd Street, will have these 2 corners that overlook the avenue. So if you have any fairs or anything that the city puts on, you'll have these two complementary and almost like mirrors of each other at these corners. You have the two corner courtyards and you have the two roof deck amenities. So I think that'll look really nice from looking down at it.
Just generating all that activity and energy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch real quick on what we were talking about, the third level of residential. So we're stepping it back at the plaza, but if you take a look at 2nd Street, that's all roof as well. So what would be, some could consider a 4th floor, by the 3rd floor being over the garages, we're actually doing a full step back from 2nd Street. We want to do that for a couple reasons. One, hierarchy. We think Avenue of Flags needs to feel like it's the main street that has the bigger buildings, and the 2nd Street has secondary buildings. So we thought this was a really appropriate way to have Avenue of Flags have that hierarchy. If you go ahead and hit the next slide. This just shows us the typical units. We don't have to go into that detail today, but I just want to let you know we've figured out how these colored boxes work with real units. So if you go ahead and hit the next slide. This just shows you guys the model that we were talking about. We've gone ahead and put this in 3D. It just really helps the mind to be able to see it all in 3D and how it relates. And so you can see the roof deck on the corner of Avenue of Flags. You can also see how the units step back on 2nd Street, and you can see our elevator. We're able to do one elevator that connects all these units together so that when we do the affordable units, we can also have some adaptable units, which is really important for accessibility. Go ahead and hit the next slide. This just shows you from the other side. So this just flips all the way around. So now Avenue of Flags is on the far back. And this just gives you an opportunity to see what those garages could look like in the back. As you see, the garages are lined up. They'll have real garage doors, so it'll look a little bit better than tuck under parking. It'll be pretty clean, and it'll play in really nicely with the Art Deco style. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So we actually pulled a few Art Deco buildings that we thought were really good inspiration and pulled from the specific plan. So these are just some of the pictures that we took from. Be able to find that rhythm, that hierarchy, and some of the amazing features of the Art Deco, which is some of those pillars that have all the fun detailing. So if you go ahead and hit the next slide, you can see right away how that 2nd story massing on the plaza just feels right, kind of hugs, and the building has that strong rhythm to it, both in the fenestrations and in the pillars, and this is the way we organized the building. And we went ahead and had fun with our elevator tower and brought in and made it a little bit of piece of Art Deco, kind of really fun thing that you can see, and it kind of pulls your eye down 2nd Street, which we were really excited about. And you can go ahead and see that we have our outdoor plaza and also a couple opportunities where we think there might be some outdoor dining on a fairly large sidewalk. And then down on the left would be where the additional on-site park or off-site parking would be. We didn't count the ones on 2nd Street for you. We didn't tally those up because they're already existing. We're not removing any, we're maintaining them. Go ahead and hit the next slide. And this takes us to our last slide before I show you the pictures. So this section really helps you see how that relates. Is everyone going to hear me okay if I walk up to the screen for you?
Take the mic.
Just right there. I'm done. I just wanted to show you right there. Under the bridge, as such an architect, I have to point with my hands. I usually have a mouse or something. Right there is where we wanted to make sure that the utility trucks, I just want to make sure that was clear. Because that's a really important thing when we design this. You can't just put a bridge in. You have to make sure that trucks are able to fully get all the way around, especially with our trash enclosures that meet your guys' standards in the back. We wanted to make sure that worked. So that, I hope that maybe there's some other questions, but mostly what this shows is there's only residential common space, commercial space, and garages on the ground floor, which enables us to build in the flood zone. And as Brandon just mentioned, we have a variety of systems we can use so that when it is raining, you come out and you have storm prevention plans so that those buildings don't get damaged by the water, but you're not allowed to use actual residential units on that level. And you go ahead and hit the final slide here. This is just our examples that we've used on a variety of projects for the solar panels. It's a very elegant car system. It's very modern looking, and it's a really cool amenity too, as we try to become more environmental friendly in our world. To be able to show off right away, this project is trying to do that with bringing the solar panels in a pedestrian level rather than just hidden up on the roof behind a parapet. And then you can see on the right what this tandem garage could look like. I like this picture because it has the cars outlined in chalk, so it's really easy to see, but they're not blocking the view of what the space could be like. And then I went ahead and showed both in plan what that would look like, and then it's not the right style, we're doing Art Deco, but it shows you what these garages could end up looking like in the back. So we think it has a really good residential feel. We think it provides a great amenities for people who want to live here. I mean, how great is it to be able to rent a 2-bedroom unit and have 2 covered parking spaces for you? We think it's a bonus rather than a negative to be able to have a tandem. So, Brandon, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to say, but I feel like we've shared a lot, and I think it's probably time for you guys to have any of your questions.
I'll just quickly, before I turn it over, on the pedestrian bridges, out of curiosity, are those concrete?
We'd have to look at our instructions just
Okay.
how we want to do them.
Okay.
Most likely it would have to be some kind of steel to be able to get the
Okay.
profiles that we need,
Okay,
right? Because steel's so good in tensile, we're gonna have to do the
Okay.
steel.
And at this stage too, this is just, the conceptual stage. Over the next, many months, we'll be kind of fine tuning the feedback and trying to see what actually works and gets buildable. But this is, I would say, just our, kind of not our first pass, but
Yeah. No, with the
70%.
and with the Art Deco, maybe we look at it and go, it wouldn't be exposed steel anyway, right? Because it would be fireproof and all those things. So it would look like just like the rest of the building, nice
Right.
plaster and everything on that.
okay.
We could probably have some fun with it, just like we did with the elevator.
Awesome.
Well, that was my next question. Oh, if
Yeah,
you
go
mind.
ahead.
With only one elevator going up to the second, third floor, do you foresee any problems with tenants who, for some reason, might have issues? I mean, with just only one elevator, if you're living on the other side, you have to go, and now if someone's pushing you, or, I mean, is there?
We can encourage it in a couple ways, right? So our adaptable units should all be the closest units to that elevator. That would be our best way to do it. But otherwise, if you're, your grandma and you're visiting or whatever it might be, the one elevator, it's not that far of a walk across, but you're right, it would be a little bit further.
Yeah,
But
I was gonna.
for this
yeah.
scale of a project, though,
Right.
the one elevator seemed to be the right answer.
Yeah, and if you look at here too, so most of the residential units are basically centered in that second building.
Right.
And I believe there's only maybe like 14 or 15 units that are above the commercial. So those units, we're almost serving 75% of the project with that one elevator all close by. We had considered potentially putting a second elevator in the back, and maybe if we want to make it, kind of a private elevator for those residents or something like that, we can consider it. Something that we're still working through, but right now we felt that the, kind of walking time and distance between everything still seemed pretty reasonable, considering how it's laid out.
And when we looked at the cost benefits, right? So if you build 2 elevators, you wouldn't have to build the bridges. But when we looked at all the amenities, we were like, we'd rather build the bridges and you take the money that would have gone in a second elevator and build the bridges and make a cohesive project and have all the, each roof amenity available to each of all the users. So we thought in general, it actually was a positive for the project to do one elevator.
Is it on?
That was the only question.
This is a good question. We definitely thought through it.
I'm getting older.
No.
Commissioner Sarkia, questions?
So there's 2 sets of stairs and they're both on the insides of the residential area, but no external staircase.
It's actually 3 sets of stairs. There's one in building 1, just hitting that in the corner,
All right, it's
and
inside.
then 2 in building 2.
All right. Yeah, if there's a fire, I wouldn't want to be on I'd want an outside staircase or fire escape.
And it just depends on how we want to detail them and build them. They would all be exterior stairs.
And it all has to meet fire code anyway.
Right. I was going to say, yeah. So obviously at the conceptual stage, we haven't routed the plans to fire and building and for compliance with those codes. But of course, the project ultimately would need to be compliant with those fire requirements.
And they're very specific about their lengths and where they're ranged, and they have to be the 2/3 distance of a building. So yeah, all that good stuff.
I like the crown that you have on Avenue of the Flags at the top of the buildings. But why isn't Second Street using the same crown?
Can you emphasize what you're talking about? Can you clarify? You're talking about
The far left-hand corner of Avenue of the Flags. And
that crown, and then the second one, yeah.
yeah, and then on Second Street, your crown is completely different.
It's a little bit more simple, right? Just
Yeah.
yeah. Just just trying to create, again, that hierarchy
Yeah.
on avenue flags. But if you guys want us to see that same detail around that, that's something we're willing to do, of course.
It's always a challenge between making sure we get everything that we want and make sure the cost
Yeah.
makes sense too. So we figure we put most of the cost that we can on on avenue flags, as that will be the, you know, main visual corridor and main driver. And then when you come off of Second Street, we kind of wanted to simplify a little bit just to make sure.
It really makes the eye go to the elevator too. It's like, wow.
Yeah, because you really got to nitpick this thing. You've guys done a wonderful job
Oh,
of all your detail work.
thank you so much.
I had a lot of practice last few years.
Get out of here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. Very nice, very thorough. You come up with a very creative solution for this project. Architecturally, I think it's nice, looks good. One concern I have is the width of the sidewalk along Avenue of the Flags. How wide is that? Do you know?
That's a good question. If you can go back to it, I think I put,
I believe code states it has to be 12 feet, right? So
I believe so.
It doesn't look 12 feet, but maybe it is. But
It's hard to tell the massing.
Yeah, I
on
can't
and
quite.
you know, because of in the perspectives and in your discussion, you mentioned how you'd like to see outdoor seating on that on the sidewalk. If that's the case, I really think it needs to be wide enough to comfortably have walkers pass by with outdoor seating. I really think it's important to not forget about or to really emphasize the walkability factor of Avenue of the Flags. And if we're encroaching all the way to that zero setback and we're designing something 40 feet tall, and it also looks like you have a canopy overhang the sidewalk,
Right?
it could really might be uncomfortable. I mean, if you have an overhang that's overhanging the whole sidewalk and you're requiring people to walk underneath it,
Right.
I'm just concerned about the amount of space.
Okay.
We'll definitely address that. And actually, one of the key things that I championed for Creekside when we got the parking reduction was that I felt that people are going to park on Avenue of Flags in your guys' medians and then actually walk around. So the walkability of these projects is actually very important to me. I feel like people aren't going to be parking in our retail to go to the retail. They'll be parking somewhere else on the avenue or on a median and then be walking through kind of all of Avenue of Flags and enjoying all the shops and retail. So we will definitely take a look and make sure that it's usable and actually workable in real life.
Yeah, because per plan and per section, it looks about the same width of a car, which is not 12 feet.
I think it's 8 feet. That was what we put in our sidewalks, but
So that might be tight if you want to encourage outdoor seating. I don't know if it's permissible by the city, but if you get rid of the parallel parking and just have that all bumped out sidewalk like you have at the corner along the plaza, that could make a really,
do you feel like
Interesting
that's more
space.
favorable for the city than 7 more parking spaces?
I would like to see that personally, yes.
Any comments about code or anything?
So, we'll have to take a look back at the specific plan and the type and design of the parking that was anticipated in the plan in that area. I know that at this conceptual stage, they were proposing to install some of the public parallel parking, likely consistent with the specific plan, but we'll have to go back and take a look to see what that looks like. But ultimately it'll just be, what's consistent with the specific plan. And again, at the discretion, certain discretions at the part of both the planning commission and the city council. So.
Well, after what we've seen with COVID, I mean, parking spaces are getting taken over for outdoor seating, which is working.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that we might be able to convince someone that could be the suitable.
So we'll, when we start working through this with the applicant, we'll take a look at the specific plan, see what it calls for, see how, we might be able to work with the applicant to resolve those potentially conflicting
Because
needs
overall,
there.
parking is always going to be a big issue,
Right.
no matter here or farther up the chain here.
Yeah.
It's a balance.
It is a
Yeah.
balance, and I agree with Aaron on that part of it. And also, we've had that discussion before, and on being on the council when we passed the other one, is that parking is, when we do think about what's going to happen on Avenue of the Flag later on, parking is going to become an, even though we have our general big parking lot down the median,
Mhm.
convenience is everything. I mean, all you have to do to see what's happening in Solvang is that if you can't park here, no one stops sometimes because you don't. I just comment wise is on the parking, you did an outstanding job. I am in favor. Hopefully it'll pass on the tandem. My daughter was in nursing school in LA, and the apartment building that she lived in, her nursing roommate, they had tandem parking and it worked great. And so hopefully it's not an issue, but I think it's something that we're looking at going forward, and some of these other buildings that we're doing and what we're, it's something that's working. I commend you for being able to bring it up forward and going forward with it.
Yeah, and I'll just say on the tandem parking. So, tandem parking, I guess, would not necessarily, in terms of what the code, the code does address tandem parking. So it's not necessarily new to Buellton. I mean, I can't think of any projects off the top of my head that utilize it currently. However, in the code, it does address it. It's just a matter of, taking a look at where the code addresses it, where it kind of limits it, and then ultimately what we could bring back. We'll look into that as part of their application submittal, and we'll bring back, some more information on that. And it may be that there's some discretion on the part of the Planning Commission and the City Council to allow tandem parking potentially, or consider tandem parking as part of the project. So
the only other comment I had is even though Second Street is kind of like not the main focus, but when it comes time to look at it overall, landscaping is going to be a big part of it. So
On both streets.
Yeah.
Avenue and
I think you did a great presentation. I think it's something that's very doable. So hopefully this will keep going forward and get built.
Thanks, Aaron.
Marcelo, finishing comments?
I'm good, but if Bob was here, he'd really look into
The trees.
what type of trees and,
Yes.
and what you have for the landscape, and would want to make sure that it's something that'll grow in Buellton and thrive. Some of the stuff we've seen show trees and bushes that won't thrive here in Buellton. So you just want to be aware of that.
That's good. We'll take note. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Commissioner Leggett, any following comments? No?
That's it. Thank you.
Well, I want to commend you on the Art Deco, of course. I think it looks great. At some point in the future, I would like to see, and it's not a requirement, but in the renderings, maybe do a comparable of both corners so we can kind of see how they play off each other and look good together and all that kind of thing. I think the elevator concept, the Art Deco on it is awesome. So anyway, I think, again, good job on everything. You answered all my tandem parking questions, although it sounds like that'll keep coming back. And I think we're going forward.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, so next, written comments, none. Planning Commissioner comments, any comments? Was there a green team meeting a week ago or something? Did anyone go or
was absent.
Zoom? Okay.
Other than Zoom?
Did you- Well, I think it was on Zoom.
Oh, man.
Yeah, okay. So any other commissioner comments?
just nice to be back in
I know,
person.
it's awesome, isn't it? I'm just gonna do two little administrative reminder. This coming Saturday at noon at the Postal Annex is the mural project unveiling, and that's part of the Arts and Culture Committee, kind of newly formed in the last couple of years. Second reminder is Saturday, July 31st, our annual, when we didn't have it last year, our Buellton Barbecue Bonanza from 11 to 2. And I believe city staff is still looking for volunteers if anyone wants to wrap sandwiches and help serve or just attend. And that's all I have. So I will turn it over to our planning director reports.
Great. Well, thank you, Commissioner Hamel. Yeah, I just would like to echo the sentiment here. It's really nice to be back in person and see you all in person. I think it's been, for me, about a year and a half. So, and probably a similar amount of time for all of you. So nice to see you all, and just would like to welcome Commissioner Liggett in person to our council chambers and in-person planning commission meetings. So, yeah, just really, really happy to be back. So other than that, I was going to mention the barbecue bonanza and the mural unveiling. So thank you, Commissioner Hamill. No, I appreciate that.
I always do that.
It's totally fine. And just lastly, Chair Hamill had come to me earlier in the week based upon a prior department report where we had indicated some information about recent ADU, so accessory dwelling unit applications coming through. So I just, thought I'd take a couple minutes to kind of just give a status update on accessory dwelling units in Buellton and the ordinance that was adopted last year, and how many applications we've processed through the process, and just have a general overview of that. And not really intended to be a detailed description of the ordinance or get into any of the nuances, but really just to kind of remind the Planning Commission of the fact that, back in earlier 2020, we did adopt a local ADU ordinance, accessory dwelling unit ordinance, in response to state law, basically allowing accessory dwelling units and mandating certain things of jurisdiction in terms of discretion, the level of discretion, and sort of loosening up of restrictions that local jurisdictions can place on accessory dwelling units. So if you'll recall, prior to the state law related to accessory dwelling units, we had in our code that was existing a secondary dwelling unit ordinance. And so, there's a lot of the restrictions with the state ADU laws basically loosen the restrictions on property owners and developers who wish to develop those or to build those. And so, the concept of accessory dwelling units was not necessarily totally new to Buellton because we had, again, the secondary dwelling unit ordinance. However, it did limit the city's ability to regulate and condition and all of those types of things with accessory dwelling units. So things like, reduced setback, minimum setback requirements, lot size, we used to have for secondary dwelling units, we had a minimum lot size. So that kind of changed with the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And so all of that being said, we have seen additional applications, more so than in the past, for accessory dwelling units. I mean, it's 5, the number is 5 that we've had come through since we adopted the ordinance, but just based upon memory in the several years prior to that, when we were working under the secondary dwelling unit ordinance, I can recall off the top of my head, maybe 3 or 4 over several years that we processed through. So it's definitely catching the attention of property owners and makes sense, now with those loosening restrictions and requirements for that. So we have in the past, I guess, a little over a year and a half, have processed 5 or some of them are currently in process, but that's what we've seen come through. So, and that really, those take the form of ADUs. They can be attached, detached. So attached to the existing home, detached from the existing home, accommodated within the existing floor space of the home. And depending on what type a property owner is proposing, there's different size standards, different specific requirements for each, and they need to meet those requirements. So just wanted to address that. And if there's any specifics that the Planning Commission or any additional information that the Planning Commission would want to be brought back to be discussed at a later meeting, happy to do that. But just wanted to give a brief update on that. So other than that,
Do you guys have any questions about this?
Thank you for that information.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that concludes my planning director report then.
Great. Okay, with that, we will adjourn at 6:59 p.m.
Good job, everybody.